I've been married to my wife, Sarah, for almost 10 years. We met in college, clicked instantly, and have been what I'd call a team ever since, or at least, that's what I thought. I'm writing this because my world has been turned upside down over the last few days, and I need to vent while figuring out what the hell to do next. Let me give you some context. Sarah and I have had what I'd always describe as a solid relationship. Sure, we've had ups and downs. She can be fiery and headstrong, and I'm more laid back, which sometimes leads to arguments. But overall, we've built a life I was proud of, a home, 2 adorable dogs, and countless road trips where we dreamed about the future. Looking back now, there were signs, small ones I ignored because I trusted her completely. She'd started going out more often with her friends, dressing up more than usual. I teased her about it in that stupid, naive way husbands do, "You trying to make me jealous?" She'd roll her eyes and say something like, "Please, don't be ridiculous." I believed her because she was my wife. Why wouldn't I? And then the letter arrived. It came a few mornings ago, in a plain envelope with no return address. At first, I thought it was some junk mail, but when I opened it, my stomach dropped. Inside were photos of Sarah. Not just any photos, photos of her in a restaurant, smiling across the table at a man I'd never seen before. Another of her holding his hand in the parking lot. The last one? Them kissing. Along with the pictures was a note, "You deserve to know the truth." It felt like someone had punched me in the gut. At first, I told myself there had to be a mistake. This had to be some cruel joke or a misunderstanding, right? But the pictures didn't lie. And the note included dates and times that lined up too perfectly with the evenings Sarah claimed she was out with the girls, or working late. After the initial shock wore off, I sat there staring at those photos for what felt like hours. My brain was scrambling, trying to make sense of it. Maybe it was an old fling. Maybe someone doctored these pictures to mess with me. It was ridiculous, but denial is a hell of a drug. The note was so detailed, though. It listed specific dates, times, and even places. Whoever sent it wasn't playing games, they wanted me to know everything. One of the dates caught my eye because it was recent. Just last Friday, Sarah said she was heading out for a girls' night. I remember because I offered to drop her off, but she waved me off, saying, "No need, babe. The girls are picking me up." I couldn't just leave it there. I started going through my mental timeline of the past few months, trying to match up her stories with these supposed meetings. Suddenly, things didn't add up. I remembered another time, she came home late, claiming her coworker's car broke down, so she had to give her a ride. She smelled faintly of wine, which didn't seem odd then because, well, wine and coworkers, right? Now, it all felt like part of some sick, calculated lie. I needed proof. Real proof. That night, after Sarah fell asleep, I did something I never thought I'd do. I took her phone. We have a policy of no passwords between us, so I thought it'd be easy. Except she had changed it. That was like a slap in the face. She never had a lock on her phone before. Why now? The next day, I tried to keep things normal. I played the role of the clueless, loving husband while I kept my eyes peeled for any cracks. That evening, when she hopped in the shower, I made my move. I grabbed her phone and used the face unlock feature while she was out of sight. My hands were shaking as I opened her texts. At first, it was nothing unusual, just the group chat with her friends and some work emails. But then, there was one chat labeled Maddie, work. My stomach churned. Sarah doesn't have a coworker named Maddie. I opened it, and there he was. His name wasn't Maddie, of course, it was a man. His messages were coy, flirty, and downright intimate. Things like, "Last night was amazing, babe," and "I can't stop thinking about your smile." I felt like the walls were closing in around me. There was one message that absolutely destroyed me. It was from her: "I'll tell him soon. I just need more time." Tell me what? That you're screwing around behind my back? That everything we built means nothing? I wanted to scream, but instead, I quietly put the phone back and walked into the kitchen, trying to keep my head from exploding. I spent the rest of that night in a haze, pacing the house while Sarah acted like nothing was wrong. She laughed at some Netflix rom-com, threw out casual remarks about the dog needing a bath, and asked if I wanted to order takeout. Meanwhile, every second, I was replaying those texts in my mind. I knew I had to confront her, but I also knew that if I just let my emotions take over, I'd never get the truth. So I waited. I sat there, staring at her like she was a stranger. In some ways, she was. The next evening, I decided it was time. We were eating dinner, chicken stir-fry, her favorite. I couldn't even touch my plate. She noticed, of course. "What's wrong, babe?" she asked, setting down her fork. I stared at her for a moment. Then I pulled out the envelope with the photos and the note. I dropped it on the table in front of her. "This is what's wrong," I said, my voice so calm it scared even me. She froze. For a second, she looked confused, like she genuinely didn't know what it was. But as she flipped through the photos, her face went pale. I watched the color drain from her cheeks as she scanned the evidence. Then, she did what I dreaded most: she lied. "Where did you get these?" she asked, her voice rising. "This is insane. Someone's trying to mess with us. These are fake." Her tone was indignant, but her eyes told a different story. They darted around, never landing on me for more than a second. I leaned forward, holding her gaze. "Don't insult my intelligence, Sarah. I saw the texts. I saw everything. Don't you dare sit there and act like I'm some idiot." That's when the facade cracked. Her jaw tightened, and she slammed the photos on the table. "Fine. Yes, I've been seeing someone," she snapped, her voice laced with venom. "But it's not what you think." I couldn't believe the audacity. "Oh, really? Then what the hell is it, Sarah? Enlighten me." She launched into this twisted defense, saying it wasn't serious and that it just happened because she felt unappreciated. She said she was lonely because I've been so focused on work. "You're never around anymore," she said, as if that justified everything. I needed someone to talk to. I stared at her in disbelief. "Talk to?" I hissed. "Is that what you call sneaking around, lying to my face, and screwing some guy behind my back? Talking?" She rolled her eyes. Rolled her damn eyes. "Don't act so high and mighty. You work all the time. You don't even notice when I'm upset. This wouldn't have happened if you were a better husband." I felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. "A better husband?" I repeated, my voice shaking. "I've been killing myself to build a life for us. And this is what I get?" She crossed her arms, her face a mask of defiance. "Well, maybe if you'd paid more attention to me, I wouldn't have had to go elsewhere." That was it. Something inside me broke. I stood up, gripping the edge of the table to steady myself. "You don't get to blame me for your shitty choices, Sarah. You don't get to play the victim here." Her response? A smug, half shrug. "Maybe you should think about why I felt the need to cheat." Her words hit me like a wrecking ball. I stood there, gripping the table so hard my knuckles turned white. Why you felt the need? I said, my voice trembling. No. You don't need to cheat. You chose to. You chose to betray me, Sarah. Stop trying to twist this. She sighed like I was the one being unreasonable. Look, I'm sorry, okay? But I can't go back in time and undo it. You've been checked out for months, and I needed. Don't you dare finish that sentence, I cut her off. My voice cracked, but I didn't care. Don't you dare try to tell me this is my fault. I've been working my ass off for us, and instead of talking to me, instead of saying you were struggling, you decide to, what? Go behind my back and fuck some other guy. She flinched at my words, but the mask of defiance stayed firmly in place. It wasn't just about sex, she snapped. It was emotional too. I needed someone who. I slammed my hand on the table, making her jump. Stop. Just, stop. I can't listen to this. There was a long, suffocating silence. The kind where a million things are running through your head, but none of them make it to your lips. I looked at her, really looked at her, and realized I didn't recognize the person sitting across from me. This wasn't the woman I married, the woman I thought I'd spend the rest of my life with. Who is he? I finally asked, my voice barely above a whisper. At least give me that much. Her eyes darted away, and she hesitated before answering. He's someone from work. Of course, he was. My stomach twisted. How long? She shrugged, like it didn't matter. A few months. Months. Months of lies, of sneaking around, of looking me in the eye every day and pretending nothing was wrong. The weight of it all came crashing down, and I sank back into my chair, burying my face in my hands. I felt hollow. Broken. I don't even know what to say to you, I muttered. I gave you everything, Sarah. I trusted you. And you, my voice broke. I couldn't even finish the sentence. For the first time, her tone softened. I didn't mean to hurt you, she said quietly. I never wanted it to get this far. I laughed bitterly, shaking my head. You didn't mean to hurt me? That's your excuse? You didn't mean to, but you kept doing it. You kept lying, day after day. Do you even understand what you've done? Or are you so far gone that you don't even care anymore? She didn't answer. Instead, she sat there staring at the table, her expression unreadable. I wanted her to say something, anything, that could make sense of this mess, but the silence said it all. There was nothing left to say. After that conversation, I left the house. I didn't say where I was going, and honestly, I didn't know myself. I just needed to get out of there before the walls closed in completely. I drove aimlessly for hours, no music, no calls, just the hum of the road and the weight of what had just happened. At one point, I pulled over into an empty parking lot and just sat there. I felt everything at once, anger, sadness, confusion, and this crushing sense of betrayal that made it hard to breathe. My chest felt tight, my hands were shaking, and for the first time in years, I cried. Full-on, gut-wrenching sobs. It wasn't just about the cheating, it was about the life we'd built, the trust one thought we had, and the realization that it was all a lie. I thought about the times I stayed late at work to provide for us, the nights we spent dreaming about our future, and the little moments of laughter and love that now felt tainted. Did any of it even mean anything to her? Was I just some convenient fallback while she chased whatever this other guy was giving her? I kept replaying her words in my head, I didn't mean to hurt you. Like that was supposed to make it better. Like it somehow erased the months of deceit. I wondered if she even understood the gravity of what she'd done or if she just saw this as a bump in the road. To me, it felt like a dead end. When I finally made it back home, the house was dark. She was in bed, or at least pretending to be. I didn't care. I went straight to the spare bedroom and shut the door. That night, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those photos. Her face, lit up with a smile I hadn't seen in months. His hand on hers. The kiss. It was like a knife twisting in my chest over and over. The next morning, she tried to talk to me. She knocked on the spare bedroom door, her voice soft and hesitant. "Can we talk?" "No," I said firmly. "Not right now." She didn't push. I heard her walk away, and then the sound of the coffee machine humming in the kitchen. The normalcy of it all made me want to scream. How could she act like everything was fine when she'd blown our entire life apart? That day at work, I was a zombie. I went through the motions, answered emails, sat through meetings, but my mind was 1,000 miles away. Every so often, I'd get this overwhelming urge to message her, to demand more answers, but I stopped myself. What would it change? I already knew the truth, and no amount of talking was going to undo it. Instead, I started thinking about my next move. Could I stay? Should I even try? Part of me wanted to pack my bags and leave, but another part clung to the life we'd built, to the hope that maybe, just maybe, there was a way to salvage it. That hope felt pathetic, though. She had destroyed my trust, and without trust, what was left? The days that followed were a blur of awkward silences, forced interactions, and this suffocating tension that hung over the house like a storm cloud. Sarah tried to act like things were normal, but every conversation felt like walking through a minefield. I could see it in her face. She was waiting for me to blow up, to say something definitive, but I didn't. Not yet. I wasn't ready. I didn't know what to say, and honestly, I wasn't sure what I wanted. A few nights later, I found myself alone in the kitchen, staring at the envelope of photos. I hadn't thrown them away. I couldn't. They felt like my lifeline to reality, proof that I wasn't crazy, that this nightmare was real. But as I looked at them, I felt this wave of exhaustion hit me. I didn't want to keep looking. I didn't want to keep feeling this way, like my entire life was spiraling out of control. That's when I made my first concrete decision. I needed space. Not just emotional space, but physical space. I couldn't think clearly with Sarah just a few rooms away, pretending like everything could somehow go back to normal. So, the next morning, I told her. "I'm leaving for a few days," I said over breakfast. She froze mid-bite, her fork hovering in the air. "Leaving?" She repeated, her voice barely above a whisper. "I need time to think," I said firmly. "And I can't do that here." She started to protest. "But we need to talk." "Not right now," I cut her off. "I'm not ready for that. I need to figure out what I want, and I can't do that with you here." She didn't say anything after that, just nodded stiffly and went back to her coffee. I could tell she was hurt, but at that point, I couldn't bring myself to care. I packed a bag and drove to a friend's house, someone I trusted enough to share what was going on. Mike has been my best friend since high school, and if anyone could help me make sense of this mess, it was him. When I told him everything, he didn't sugarcoat his reaction. "Dude, she's trash," he said bluntly. "You don't come back from something like this." I didn't argue with him, but I also didn't agree. It wasn't that simple. I wasn't ready to just walk away, not yet. There was too much history, too much love, or at least what I thought was love, to throw it all away without trying to understand what went wrong. But deep down, I knew he had a point. This wasn't something you just get over. Over the next few days, I spent a lot of time reflecting. I thought about the good times, the bad times, and everything in between. I thought about what forgiveness would even look like, and whether it was something I was capable of. Could I ever trust her again? Could I ever look at her without seeing him? The more I thought about it, the more I realized that even if I wanted to forgive her, I might not be able to. When I finally returned home, I still didn't have all the answers. But I knew one thing for sure: I couldn't keep pretending everything was okay. Something had to change. When I walked back into the house after those few days away, it felt different. Not like home anymore. It was more like stepping into a stranger's space, one where nothing felt safe or familiar. Sarah was waiting in the living room, perched on the edge of the couch like she'd been sitting there for hours. Her eyes were puffy, like she'd been crying the whole time I was gone. "Can we talk now?" she asked softly, almost pleading. I sighed, dropping my bag by the door. "Yeah. Let's talk." I sat down across from her, not next to her. That felt important somehow, keeping the space between us. She shifted nervously, her hands twisting together in her lap. "I've been thinking a lot," she began, her voice shaky. "And I know I've hurt you, more than I can even begin to explain. I was selfish, and I didn't think about what it would do to you. But I want to fix this. I'll do anything to fix this." I stared at her, trying to process her words. They sounded good, sure, but they also felt rehearsed, like she'd spent the past few days practicing what to say to keep me from walking out for good. "You want to fix this?" I asked, my voice calm but cold. "How, Sarah? How do you think we fix something like this?" She opened her mouth to answer but stopped, her expression crumbling as the reality of the question hit her. She didn't have an answer. Of course, she didn't. "I'll go to therapy," she blurted out finally. "We can go to couples counseling. I'll cut off all contact with him, I already have. I'll do anything, I swear." I shook my head slowly. "Therapy doesn't fix trust, Sarah. It doesn't erase what you've done." She started crying then, full-on sobbing. "I know I messed up," she choked out. "But I love you, and I don't want to lose you. Please, please give me another chance." I sat there, watching her fall apart, and I felt nothing. Not pity, not anger, not even satisfaction. Just emptiness. It scared me how numb I felt, like she'd taken every emotion I had and drained it completely. "I need you to listen to me," I said finally, my voice steady. "I don't know if I can forgive you. I don't know if I even want to forgive you. Right now, all I know is that I can't live like this, pretending everything's fine when it's not." She nodded, her tears streaming down her face. "I understand," she whispered. "But please, don't give up on us." I stood up, needing to put space between us again. "I'm not making any promises," I said. "I need more time. And I need you to stop pushing me for answers I don't have yet." She didn't say anything, just nodded again. I could see the desperation in her eyes, but it didn't move me. Not anymore. That night, I started making real plans. I reached out to a lawyer, just to understand my options. I wasn't ready to file for divorce, but I needed to know what it would look like if I did. I also started looking at apartments. The thought of leaving the house, the one we'd built together, hurt like hell, but staying there felt unbearable. I didn't tell Sarah any of this. Not yet. I wasn't ready to have that conversation, and I wasn't sure if or when I would be. For now, I just needed to focus on taking care of myself. Over the next few days, I avoided Sarah as much as I could. We didn't argue or yell, we just existed in the same space, silent and tense. I kept to the spare room, she stayed in the master bedroom, and we barely exchanged more than a few words. It was like we were roommates who had nothing in common. One evening, after work, she cornered me in the kitchen. I could tell she'd been gearing up for this talk all day. Her body was stiff, and her hands clutched the counter like it was the only thing holding her up. "I can't take this anymore," she said, her voice cracking. "This distance. It's killing me." I put down the coffee mug I'd been rinsing and turned to face her. "What do you want me to say, Sarah? That I'm fine? That I've forgiven you? Because I haven't." She flinched, but I pressed on. "You made your choices, and now we're here. I'm not the one who destroyed this marriage, so don't stand there acting like I owe you anything right now." Her eyes filled with tears, but I wasn't about to let her guilt trip me. "I know I screwed up," she said, her voice trembling. "But how are we supposed to fix this if you won't even try?" I sighed, running a hand through my hair. "Do you even hear yourself? You expect me to just jump into fixing this when I don't even know if it's fixable. I need time, Sarah. And I need space. If you can't give me that, then this is already over." That conversation set the tone for the next week. I laid down clear boundaries, no pressuring me for answers, no crying fits designed to guilt me into staying, and absolutely no contact with the guy she cheated with. I told her that if I found out she'd been in touch with him, I was gone, no discussions, no second chances. She agreed, though I could tell it hurt her to hear how cold I'd become. But I couldn't care about her feelings right now. I was too busy trying to pick up the pieces of my own. In the meantime, I started therapy on my own. I wasn't ready for couples counseling, but I knew I needed to work through my own feelings before I could even consider working on our marriage. My therapist was blunt but kind, and she helped me understand that it was okay to take my time. "Healing isn't linear," she said. "You don't have to make a decision today, tomorrow, or even next month." That gave me some relief, but it also made me realize something important. I had to figure out what I wanted, not what Sarah wanted, not what society said I should do, but what was best for me. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I had some control over my life again. Sarah, on the other hand, was struggling. She tried to act normal, cooking dinner, cleaning the house, even leaving little notes for me like she used to when things were good. But it all felt hollow. I could see the cracks in her facade, the way her hands shook when she handed me my coffee, the way her smile never quite reached her eyes. She was trying, but it wasn't enough. Not yet. Then, one night, she crossed a line. I was sitting in the spare room, scrolling through my phone, when she knocked and came in without waiting for an answer. She had tears streaming down her face. "I can't do this anymore," she said, her voice breaking. "I'm sorry, but I can't. I need to know if you're going to forgive me or if I should just leave." Her words hit me like a freight train. "Leave?" I repeated, stunned. "You think this is about you deciding whether to stay or go? You're the one who did this, Sarah. Not me. If anyone gets to make that decision, it's me." She looked taken aback, like she hadn't expected me to push back. I don't know how to fix this," she said weakly. I stood up, my voice calm but firm. "Then don't try to fix it right now. Respect the boundaries I've set, or this is over. I'm serious, Sarah. If you can't give me what I need, I'm done." That night, after Sarah left the spare room, I lay awake for hours. Her words kept replaying in my head. I need to know if you're going to forgive me or if I should just leave. The sheer audacity of it. She was the one who broke us, and now she wanted to control the timeline for how I dealt with it. It felt like another betrayal, just layered on top of the one I was already drowning in. The next morning, I woke up with a sense of clarity. For weeks, I'd been paralyzed, stuck in this limbo of indecision. But something shifted overnight. I realized that Sarah wasn't just waiting for me to forgive her, she was trying to force me into a corner. She wanted me to make a choice so she could stop living in the discomfort she created. And I wasn't going to let her do that to me. Later that day, I told her we needed to talk. She sat down at the dining table, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, her eyes scanning my face like she was trying to figure out what was coming. I didn't waste any time. "Sarah," I started, "I've been thinking a lot about everything. About what you've done, about where we are now, and about what I need to move forward." Her breath hitched, but she didn't say anything. "And here's the truth, I don't think I can forgive you. Not now. Maybe not ever. What you did didn't just hurt me, it broke me. It broke the trust, the love, the life we built together. And I don't know if that's something we can fix." Tears welled up in her eyes, but I didn't stop. "I don't hate you," I said, surprising even myself. "But I don't think I love you the way I used to. And I think it's time we face the fact that this marriage might be over." Her sobs broke the silence, and for a moment, I almost faltered. Almost. But then I remembered the texts, the lies, the months of betrayal, and I steeled myself. "I can't keep living like this," I continued. "It's not fair to me, and honestly, it's not fair to you either. You say you want to fix this, but I don't think either of us knows how. And dragging it out is just going to hurt us both more." She begged me to reconsider. She swore she'd do anything to prove she could be better, that she could rebuild the trust she'd destroyed. But I'd heard it all before. And I was done listening. "Sarah," I said gently but firmly, "you had months to think about what you were doing. Every time you lied to me, every time you chose him over me, you made a decision. Now it's my turn to make one." She collapsed into sobs, and for the first time, I didn't feel the urge to comfort her. I just sat there, waiting for her to finish, because I knew this was the end. That evening, I started packing. I didn't take much, just some clothes, my laptop, and a few sentimental items. When I told her I was moving out, she begged me to stay, to give her another chance. But I couldn't. I'd already given her more than she deserved. I moved into a small apartment across town. It wasn't much, but it was mine, and it was a fresh start. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe again. The weight of her betrayal didn't disappear overnight, but being away from her made it easier to think, to process, to heal. The first night in the apartment was strange. It was eerily quiet, no sound of Sarah moving around, no shared rituals like watching TV or arguing over what to order for dinner. For the first time in nearly a decade, I was truly alone. And I felt free. Not happy, not relieved, but free. It was like I'd been holding my breath for weeks, and now I could finally exhale. But that freedom came with an ache I couldn't shake. I didn't just lose a wife, I lost the life we'd built together. All the memories, all the plans for the future, were now tainted by her betrayal. I didn't know how to separate the good from the bad, and for a while, I wasn't even sure if I wanted to try. In the following days, I threw myself into work. It was easier to focus on spreadsheets and deadlines than to dwell on everything that had gone wrong. My coworkers noticed the change, but I brushed off their questions with a polite, just some personal stuff. I wasn't ready to unpack everything yet, especially not with people who didn't really know me. Therapy became my anchor. My therapist pushed me to confront the pain I was burying and to stop blaming myself for Sarah's choices. "You're not responsible for her actions," she reminded me. "You did what you could in that marriage. She's the one who betrayed your trust." It was a hard pill to swallow because deep down, I'd internalized her accusations. That I worked too much. That I wasn't present enough. That I didn't give her what she needed. But as I reflected, I started to see how unfair those claims were. I wasn't perfect, sure, but I was a good husband. I loved her, supported her, and gave her everything I could. And instead of talking to me about what she felt was missing, she chose to go behind my back. One day, about a week after I moved out, she called me. I debated whether to answer but eventually picked up. Her voice was small, broken. She wanted to know if there was any chance we could fix things, if I'd reconsider. Part of me wanted to believe that we could somehow rebuild what we'd lost. But I knew better. "I'm sorry, Sarah," I said, my voice steady but firm. "I just don't think I can come back from this. Too much has happened, and I don't think I'll ever be able to trust you again." Her silence on the other end was deafening. When she finally spoke, her voice cracked. "I'll always love you," she whispered. "I'll always care about you too," I said. "But love isn't enough sometimes." We said our goodbyes, and I hung up, feeling both lighter and heavier at the same time. It was the final nail in the coffin of our marriage, and while it hurt, it also felt like the closure I needed to truly start moving forward. Over the next few weeks, I began rebuilding my life piece by piece. I reconnected with friends I'd lost touch with, started going to the gym again, and even took up a hobby I'd always wanted to try, photography. For the first time in years, I was living for myself, not for anyone else. And it felt good. As the days turned into weeks, I found myself reflecting more and more on what had happened. At first, I replayed every argument, every misunderstanding, every missed signal, wondering if there had been something I could have done to prevent it. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that no amount of self-blame could change the facts. Sarah's betrayal wasn't a reaction to something I did, it was a choice she made. A deliberate, calculated choice. And while it took time to let go of the guilt, I eventually started to see that her actions said more about her than they ever did about me. One thing that stood out to me during therapy was the concept of boundaries. Looking back, I realized how often I let things slide because I didn't want to rock the boat. The little lies, the dismissive comments, the moments when she'd make me feel like my concerns were invalid, I excused all of it because I wanted to believe in us. I wanted to believe that love would always be enough. But love without respect, without honesty, isn't love at all. It's a lie we tell ourselves to avoid facing the hard truths. And that's a lesson I'll carry with me moving forward. Love alone can't sustain a relationship. It takes trust, communication, and mutual effort to build something real. Another lesson? The importance of paying attention to your own needs. For so long, I prioritized Sarah's happiness over my own. I worked longer hours to provide for us, ignored my own exhaustion to make sure she felt supported, and bent over backward to meet her needs. But somewhere along the way, I lost myself. Being alone again forced me to confront that. I started asking myself questions I hadn't thought about in years. What do I want? What makes me happy? It was both terrifying and liberating to realize I didn't have all the answers, but at least I was finally asking the right questions. About a month after I moved out, I came across an old photo album while unpacking. It was filled with pictures from our early days, road trips, lazy Sundays, random moments of joy. For the first time since everything fell apart, I didn't feel a surge of anger or sadness looking at them. Instead, I felt gratitude. Those moments were real, even if they were later overshadowed by her betrayal. And while I wouldn't go back to her, I could at least appreciate the good times for what they were. As more time passed, I started to feel a sense of closure. It wasn't like flipping a switch, more like gradually finding my footing again after being knocked off balance. The pain was still there, but it was quieter now, less sharp. I stopped waking up every morning feeling like the world had caved in, and I started imagining a future where I could be happy again. One thing that helped was a final conversation with Sarah. She called me out of the blue one evening, her voice hesitant. "I just wanted to apologize," she said. "For everything." At first, I didn't know how to respond. I'd spent so long replaying the betrayal, building walls around myself, that hearing her own the pain she'd caused felt strange. But as she spoke, something in me softened. "I was selfish," she continued. "I let my insecurities and my own issues ruin something good. You didn't deserve that." Her words were sincere, and for the first time, they didn't feel like an attempt to win me back. She wasn't asking for forgiveness or begging for another chance, she was just acknowledging the truth. "Thank you," I said quietly. "I appreciate that." We talked for a little while longer, not about reconciliation but about moving on. She told me she was starting therapy to work through her own issues, and I wished her well. By the time we hung up, I felt lighter. It wasn't a magical fix, but it was a step toward letting go. That conversation marked a turning point for me. I realized that forgiveness didn't have to mean forgetting or excusing what happened. It just meant freeing myself from the grip of resentment. Sarah's choices would always be a part of my story, but they didn't have to define me. I also started to focus on what I wanted for the future. Therapy helped me see that I'd spent so much of my life prioritizing others that I'd forgotten to prioritize myself. So I made a list, a literal, handwritten list, of the things I wanted to do. Travel more. Learn how to cook something besides pasta. Spend more time with friends. Maybe even try dating again when I was ready. The list wasn't long or complicated, but it felt like a promise to myself to keep moving forward. One unexpected source of healing came from my friends and family. When I first told them about the breakup, I worried they'd judge me for leaving or offer empty platitudes. But instead, they showed up for me in ways I didn't expect, inviting me to hang out, checking in on my mental health, even just sitting with me in silence when I needed it. Their support reminded me that I wasn't as alone as I felt. As the months rolled on, life began to feel less like a series of survival tactics and more like, well, living. The space I had carved out for myself, physically, emotionally, mentally, was no longer a void. It was becoming a sanctuary. I started reconnecting with old hobbies, like hiking and photography. Being out in nature, with nothing but the sound of the wind and the crunch of gravel under my boots, reminded me of a time before the chaos. It wasn't just about getting fresh air, it was about finding myself again, piece by piece. One weekend, on a whim, I signed up for a cooking class. It was something I'd always joked about needing, but I never had the time or motivation to follow through. Turns out, cooking is actually therapeutic. There's something grounding about chopping vegetables, stirring sauces, and creating something tangible with your own two hands. Plus, it didn't hurt that I got to eat the results. Through those little steps, I began to reclaim my identity. I wasn't just the guy whose wife cheated on him anymore. I was building a new version of myself, one that felt stronger and more resilient than before. Dating wasn't on my radar yet, but I couldn't help noticing how much better it felt to be around people who weren't tied to the baggage of my past. Friends, co-workers, even strangers at the gym, all these interactions reminded me that the world is full of connection and possibility. The idea of opening my heart again didn't seem as impossible as it had a few months ago. It wasn't time yet, but someday, maybe. What surprised me most, though, was how much my perspective on relationships had shifted. I used to think love was about sacrifice, about giving everything you had to another person and hoping they'd do the same. Now, I see it differently. Love isn't about losing yourself for someone else, it's about building something together without erasing who you are. It's about boundaries, communication, and mutual respect. Sarah and I spoke once more, a short, polite exchange about finalizing the divorce paperwork. There was no animosity, no bitterness, just two people accepting the choices that had led them here. "I hope you find happiness," she said before hanging up. "I hope you do too," I replied. And I meant it. Not for her sake, but for mine. Holding on to anger would only weigh me down, and I was done carrying that burden. Looking back, the past months feel like a lifetime ago. It's strange how something that once consumed every part of me now feels like a scar, visible but no longer painful. The betrayal will always be a part of my story, but it doesn't define me anymore. I've learned more about myself in these months than I ever did in my entire marriage. One of the most important lessons I've taken away is this: your worth isn't determined by how others treat you. For a long time, I let Sarah's actions make me question everything about myself, whether I was a good husband, whether I was enough, whether I was deserving of love. But the truth is, her choices weren't a reflection of me. They were a reflection of her. I also realized the importance of boundaries. If I had valued my own needs earlier, spoken up when things felt off or addressed issues head-on, maybe things would have turned out differently. Or maybe not. Either way, I now know that my voice matters, and I'll never let someone else silence it again. For anyone going through something similar, here's what I'd tell you: take your time. Healing isn't linear, and it doesn't have a deadline. Don't rush yourself to forgive or forget. Allow yourself to feel everything: anger, sadness, confusion, because those feelings are valid. Don't isolate yourself. Lean on the people who love you. Friends, family, even a therapist, they can remind you of your worth when you can't see it for yourself. Focus on what you can control. You can't change the past, and you can't control what others do. What you can control is how you respond and how you choose to move forward. Forgiveness isn't for them, it's for you. Whether or not you forgive the person who hurt you, make peace with what happened. Carrying resentment only hurts you in the end. Build a life you love. Start small, try a new hobby, take a trip, make new connections. Rediscover who you are outside of the relationship that hurt you. The person I am today is not the person I was before this all happened. And I mean that in the best way possible. What I went through, Sarah's betrayal, the fallout of our marriage, the months of soul-searching, tore me apart. But it also forced me to rebuild, piece by piece, into someone stronger, someone who knows his worth, someone who doesn't settle for less than he deserves. I won't lie and say I'm completely healed or that I never think about what happened. The scars are there, and they probably always will be. But they don't hurt anymore. They remind me of what I've survived, of the strength I found when I thought I had none. For the first time in a long time, I feel excited about the future. I don't know what it holds, whether I'll find love again, whether I'll get married, whether I'll have a family. But what I do know is that whatever happens, I'll be okay. Because I've learned how to stand on my own, how to take care of myself, and how to choose happiness. even when it feels out of reach. If you're reading this and you're in the thick of heartbreak, I want you to know something: it gets better. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but slowly, surely, the pain starts to fade. And when it does, you'll see that the life you thought was over is just beginning. You'll find pieces of yourself you didn't even know you'd lost. You'll laugh again, love again, live again. You'll make it through. I promise.